Because another program is going on.
Okay, so if it's not happening, then we can just take the recording.
It says it's live. Okay.
Yes. So namaste. Namaste, everybody, and sincerely apologize for this delay due to some technical snag that we had at our end. But we'll start immediately now with a small mantra, and then I'll hand it over to the TKDL team. Dr. Vijay Lakshmi ji is going to be taking our session today. She's also a senior scientist at the TKDL organization. So I'll just start. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavijankara Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, and over to you, Vijay Lakshmi ji. Thank you.
Yeah. So a very good evening to all of you. I hope I'm audible to all. So
before you go, I'll just make a small announcement. Again, namaste to everyone, and apologies for the delay. Technical glitches, I would say. Nevertheless, I know we have started with the program today. We'll be hearing about the protection of traditional knowledge. We will be introducing the terms defensive protection, positive protection. We'll also be talking about the TKDL today. The only request that I have is that we will close this session today positively by 5:30 because of the moon landing. Hopefully, everything would go fine with the landing of our Vikram onto the moon. And I believe everybody would be interested to watch that event. So any questions that would be pending for today, we will take it up tomorrow positively. And that's a promise from our end. Vijay, back to you.
Thank you. So I'll not waste time. I'll just share my presentation. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. So as Dr. Shijani mentioned today, we will be discussing traditional knowledge, its protection through defensive and positive means of protection. These are two different things that we will be learning about today. I am aware that you already had two sessions in this workshop. The first one being you heard about traditional knowledge, the expanse of traditional knowledge. What are the different kinds of traditional knowledge that we know about, the text, the ancient literature that is present in traditional knowledge. Your second session was on intellectual property rights, a very comprehensive session on what are the different types of intellectual property rights, what are the kind of protection that is available for what terms, so on and so forth. Today, what we'll be discussing is a protection of traditional knowledge, the defensive and positive, in the positive and defensive context, and an overview of the traditional knowledge digital library. Okay. So, although you must have heard in the beginning of the workshop what traditional knowledge means, just to give you a reminder and to just brush up on what we mean by traditional knowledge. The traditional knowledge in the context of the sessions that we are having today is knowledge, know-how, skills, practices that are developed, sustained, and passed on. The important term here is generation to generation. This is often community held, and it forms a part of the cultural and spiritual identity of the community. When I say it is often community held, traditional knowledge can be within families too, it can be with individuals, but this is a general definition. And there is no consensus on what traditional knowledge means, even at the an international fora that discuss this traditional knowledge, but we do have a working definition which needs more consensus among the various countries that are discussing this. But we can take this as a working definitions and go on forward with it. So what all are the things that we talk about when we talk about traditional knowledge per se, okay? This will include intellectual, intangible, cultural heritage. So cultural heritage as in, this could mean cultural expressions, it could mean traditional knowledge. There is a slight difference between the two terms. When we talk about traditional cultural expressions, it's more of the applicative, like you have expressions of music, art, performing arts, non-performing arts. And in case of the intellectual heritage, we could mean, the agricultural knowledge, scientific and technical knowledge. You have information, non-traditional knowledge in terms of, ecological aspects, sustainability aspects, medicine knowledge you all are aware of, biodiversity related knowledge. All this information is also contained in our various traditional knowledge textbooks. Even climate related information is there. So the practices and knowledge systems of the traditional communities, including the indigenous and local communities. Now in India, we are all, a part of the indigenous local communities, although this terminology may be more specific in other countries, because when you talk about indigenous communities in countries like, say, the developed countries, they could mean a specific community. But for us, most of us fall under the category of indigenous and local communities belong to the country. And although also we have our own tribes and local people who are, part of the Indian, population. We'll come to that later. So more about when we talk about what is traditional knowledge, we also need to know where do we find such kind of traditional knowledge. So traditional knowledge, when I have just put two sources where you could find traditional knowledge. This is a general, terminology, what we call as secondary sources and primary sources. So secondary sources are basically ancient texts, manuscripts. We have a large amount of the traditional knowledge in India, which is documented. Okay? Documented in the form of text, in the form of manuscripts. It could be even in stone carvings. It is in some in the form of paintings. It is in the form of paper, and all these things are preserved within certain communities in libraries. It is available with individuals. It is there within communities. Also, we have information which is popularly available. Like, for instance, you have Ayurveda literature, you have Unani literature, Siddha literature, which has been written centuries ago, even about yoga. But all that literature is available as on today in a published format. These are all secondary sources. The only catch here is when you talk about secondary sources, India is a country of many languages. Many of these books are rare. So the accessibility and language issue is what we need to keep in mind. The other thing is articles in journals and books. These may be more contemporary. So these information sources also exist. We talk about primary sources. If they are individuals, communities, families, we will bracket as knowledge holders or traditional knowledge contributors. It's a general term that we'll be using throughout. We will use this interchangeably. By this term, we will understand that they are individuals, communities, families, which hold the information on traditional knowledge. So when we speak about classical and traditional texts or manuscripts of, which are available in India, we have to understand, when I spoke to you about accessibility, the problem with accessibility is that almost 85% of these books are out of print, okay, and out of copyright. You all know that copyright in a text subsists for 60 years after the life of the author. And many of these books are found only in libraries. You don't even have current prints of this. Some of this have been digitized, and you may find it in online archives. But there are many books which are still out of print, and you may not be able to access anywhere. The National Manuscript Mission for Manuscripts in India, which comes under the Ministry of Culture, this has documented a large number of manuscripts. These are in digitized formats. They are available, and they have also conserved so many of these manuscript folios, okay, and digitized many. So published rare books. Yet thousands of manuscripts lie scattered all over the country in unknown collections, which yet remain to be digitized or be made accessible in any form to any of us. The other form of traditional knowledge, when I speak about, you know about this, what I'm talking about is the documented traditional knowledge. There is another whole genre of traditional knowledge which is non-documented. Okay, such knowledge can be oral, that is, it is being passed through generations by word of mouth. Okay, the father passes it on to his son, son passes on to his grandson, so on and so forth. So this kind of tribal folk or oral knowledge may or may not be documented. Oral knowledge, of course, what I mean by oral knowledge is undocumented knowledge. So we have a population, a large population, close to 10%, which is tribal in India, a large indigenous population, which have immense amount of information available within them in relation to agricultural productivity, soil quality, biodiversity, conservation, laws, water scarcity, so many things. Such a knowledge may be generally known or not. It may be disclosed just within the community. It may be known to a very close number of people. Okay, it is as good as undisclosed knowledge, okay, or what we call as secret knowledge. Now, when we speak about the need for protecting traditional knowledge, as I told you, the topic for today is defensive and positive protection. So first of all, why do we need protection for traditional knowledge? Okay? So traditional knowledge, as in, we have a large gamut of information that falls under the category of traditional knowledge. So this could be traditional science and technology information, which will have significant relevance even today, or in the form of integrating that information with the current knowledge available, and going forward with more of research. Or we also have a lot of this folk art, artistic folklore, very relevant and very important type of knowledge in making, say, weaving cloth, making baskets, making certain things, which are passed on from generation to generation and currently dying, because the second generation or the third generation or the nth generation doesn't want to take up what their forefathers have been doing. Why? Because it is not economically viable. They are no longer interested. They find that that information or that knowledge is, they don't want to practice it, basically. So these are very important aspects in why we need to protect and preserve traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. So the aspects that we'll be looking into today, there are some important things that we need to understand when we speak about traditional knowledge, where the defensive or positive protection, they will have these particular parameters that we need to consider. So who owns the traditional knowledge? When you talk about protecting traditional knowledge, we need to understand who owns the traditional knowledge. Another thing is, when you take traditional knowledge from someone, in the sense you're capturing traditional knowledge, documenting traditional knowledge, there is something we call as prior informed consent. We'll learn about more of these things tomorrow. But prior informed consent basically means, have you told the particular knowledge holder from whom you took the information what that information is going to be put use is used, what use it is made of, I'm sorry, and has he given permission for you to use it in that format or even document it? Very important aspect, which when we talk about defensive and positive protection, is misappropriation. Okay? Misappropriation, because most of this information, you must have heard, it is there in pockets, it's there with people, and it is very important to their livelihoods, it is very important to their sustenance, it is very important to their whole existence in the form of their cultural and spiritual identity. Yet people would go to them, take it from them, perhaps do research on them, publish papers, do more research, convert it into commercial, the benefits for themselves, without anything going back to the person, and not even the knowledge holder not even knowing about it, okay? Without due acknowledgement or permission of the person. This is what we refer to as misappropriation. Is this knowledge being, when it is being commercially used, or when it is being published, are we, actually attributing that or giving credit to the person from whom we have taken the information? Is there any benefit sharing? Are we respecting that cultural and spiritual identity? We have to understand the particular community or the group which has the spirit, they have a great importance for that. But as a third person who's documenting that information, you may or may not understand the context or the importance of that spiritual identity. But it is important that this is maintained when you're protecting or even sharing such traditional knowledge. And another important aspect is the livelihood of knowledge holders. So this all, I'm throwing these things because these are aspects which we need to keep in mind when we consider the ways and means of protecting traditional knowledge. So in this today's lecture, we would be focusing on the biopiracy and misappropriation part. Biopiracy, in the sense, when we talk about biopiracy, it is usually associated with genetic resources, biological materials, okay? Anything that is taken without the permission of the holder or the owner. So seeking exclusive IP ownership over indigenous knowledge of nature, including when you talk about genetic resources, that would be biopiracy. When you talk about the knowledge itself, or that is originating from the indigenous people for profit without their knowledge, that is misappropriation, okay? So it is basically appropriating the rights to the genetic resources and knowledge, wrongful exploitation of indigenous knowledge and biodiversity without compensation or recognition to the people. So misappropriation of traditional knowledge has been happening for quite some time. This has been recognized too. You must have heard of turmeric and basmati and neem. Okay, so turmeric for wound healing properties. We all know that wound healing, we would apply turmeric powder or paste on any cuts or bruises, and it gets healed. This was known. Yet in 1995, a patent for this was granted in the USPTO. Why? An important aspect that we'll have to understand here is why was it granted? Two things that I mentioned before: accessibility and language. All this information is available in our various texts, but it is not in a language that a patent examiner sitting in USPTO would understand, and those books are also not accessible to him. I put some more recent examples here. The traditional handicraft, that is a kilta that they hold over their shoulders and they put agricultural produce in them. So this kilta also was, a patent application was applied for it, and this was pending for 13 years in the litigation. All these examples that I spoke about also were long pending at patent offices, and you understand litigations are very expensive, time consuming. Okay, although we may say that if something is misappropriated and we do spot it, we can go and fight back in the courts, but this is not an easy process. It's a very difficult process. This is one of the reasons that the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library came into existence. We'll go into that later, but this is to give you a background of what misappropriation has been happening of Indian traditional knowledge. So there are two types of protection that we spoke about. Protection of traditional knowledge, traditional cultural expressions, even grassroots innovations. Okay, in India, you have a lot of things that happen even at the ground level. Suppose there is someone who is having a problem. What are patents basically, or inventions basically? They are solutions to problems that exist. Okay, and we continue to innovate. We continue to think through our minds. We continue to seek solutions to our problems. Okay, innovations keep happening. So how do we protect all this? Defensive protection is a set of strategies, okay, to ensure that third parties do not gain illegitimate or unfounded IP rights. So this is a strategy to protect your knowledge from not being appropriated by someone else for commercial benefit. That's a defensive protection. It's a definite set of strategies. When we talk about positive protection, it will be in the form of a statutory positive creation of certain rights for the holder. Okay, this would be through statutory means. Like in the case of you have rights to own a house, that's a positive protection. Because if someone else takes that house from you, you have legal recourse. You can go to the court, tell them that somebody else, you can go to the police, you can file an FIR, you can seek redressal for someone having taken that property from you. Similarly, positive protection for traditional knowledge would mean a positive protection for the information, the intangible culture, the expression, or the knowledge itself or genetic resource. That's a positive protection. It would also mean for the traditional knowledge to protect and promote their traditional knowledge. So there is a need for international and national laws to create sui generis systems or to give such protection to TKTC holders for a path for legal recourse. First, we will talk about defensive protection, then I will go over to positive protection because we have very little to say for positive protection. Because as of now in India, there is no specific legal protection, that is statutory law, which protects traditional knowledge per se. Those, although there are indirect means, there are provisions in other patent laws, but there is no protection per se for traditional knowledge. So when we do talk about defensive protection, we are talking about primarily documentation of that traditional knowledge. Okay? Traditional knowledge documentation in India has been done to a very large extent by already our forefathers. Like I told you that there is a protection that is already there in the text, written in various languages. You know, Ayurveda is written in Sanskrit, Unani is written in Arabic, Persian, Urdu, Siddha is written in Tamil. We have the Soarikpa text, that is a tradition, medicinal tradition, which is practiced across the Trans-Himalayas. That is written in a language called Boti. So there are several such examples and several such languages in which our traditional knowledge has been documented. Okay? But even contemporary, even in the current context, there are several organizations, not only government organizations, non-government organizations, including universities. We have other research institutes who are all going and collecting such information and putting them in the form of some kind of document. Okay, compendiums like traditional tribal medicine, which the CCRAS has got out. Then there is information on the medicinal knowledge in the Western Ghats that is available. This is a publication. This is a database by the Indian Council of Medicine, Medical Research, ICMR. Even the Ministry of Tribal Affairs has got a lot of information on the tribal. You would actually go, if you go to the Tribal Affairs site, you can see individual information on various tribes, their practices, the knowledge that is present with them, the kind of, and artifacts they prepare with pictures. It's a very comprehensive information that is available on the website. So they have this tribal museum where all those jewelry, and you must have heard of all those various crafts which are done in Jharkhand, and also on so all this information that we have in the tribal affairs. Now this is all a way of documenting traditional knowledge so that it is available and it forms a part of the defensive protection. When we are talking about defensive protection, it means you're recording it in such a way that it becomes some sort of knowledge that is already known. So when you talk about intellectual property rights, especially in the context of patents or any other right for that matter, it has to be the information that you're taking intellectual property rights on has to be novel, it has to be new. Once you document this information, all this becomes prior art, already known information. On known information, you cannot seek IP rights. Okay, so in a way, you're protecting your knowledge by putting it down in the form of a documentation so that nobody else can take rights on them. So this is a preventive form, and hence it is called a defensive form of protection. Similarly, we have the National Medicinal Plant Board, which comes under the Ministry of Ayush. They have an Indian medicinal plant database. This has very, very comprehensive database. It has about 7,000, over 7,000 botanical names. It has thousands of vernacular names in most of the Indian languages. You will find up to 600 names of a particular plant. Okay. This database is available online. You all can go and check it up. We'll be sharing these slides with you, so you can go and have a look at these information that is available in these websites. Okay, the information that is here is linked to the systems of medicine too. So it will tell you these are the species that are used in Ayurveda. This is used in folk. This is used in Unani, so on and so forth. So you also have this NVIS portal, which talks about all information on natural resources, giving you examples of defensive protection. Defensive protection in the sense not only the traditional knowledge, it's also about the genetic resources that are available in India. And they are also linked to the associated traditional knowledge. That is, in case these a particular genetic resources is used in something, that information is also available. These are all search-based. You can go through these websites, go and have a look at them. It will give you geodistribution, it will give you propagation, trade information, so on and so forth. Also, we have several non-governmental organizations, as I mentioned. The Honeybee Network is a very important, one of the very important organizations. They work with grassroots innovators too and help people to, even file patents and intellectual property rights. So Honeybee Network also has its own databases. Similarly, you have the Indian ICAR, that is the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, which has an inventory of its own, which talks about plant species. It has a summary. Here, the difference in other databases and this has validated traditional knowledge. You know, today we have information, we have age-old traditional knowledge information. Often the questions asked are, okay, this is known, but has this been experimentally proved? Okay, then you can talk about traditional medicines. This medicine has been used in patients since thousands of years. So we can say it is validated by time and tradition. But there are many such knowledge which we have, and people often talk about validation. So there is a trend in the research organizations now. They are going back to our texts and trying to validate that information so that we can tell the world, yeah, this knowledge is known and it works. Okay. So similarly, here we have Indian traditional knowledge information. Some of the information has been validated experiments. Now I come over to the traditional knowledge digital library. We will talk about it a little in detail because the traditional knowledge library is a very, very important form of defensive protection that is available in India, which is unique to India. It's a very unique database. Okay? So a little of the background when we talk about traditional knowledge digital library. When you talk about the Indian Patents Act, I'm sure you must have also heard of this yesterday. The traditional knowledge per se is not patentable. Okay, so an invention which in effect is traditional knowledge or is just an aggregation or duplication of known properties cannot be patented. Keeping that in mind, innovations over known traditional knowledge, or there is any incremental improvement over existing knowledge, or some new surprising effect that comes out of traditional knowledge, such things are patentable, which has a significant experimental intervention. But what is just known from the text, that's not it. The traditional knowledge digital library, which I spoke to you, came from the need. The need arose from the lot of misappropriation that was going on in the background, and the need to have a text or a documentation which allowed the information that was available in our age-old manuscripts and texts to be given to the patent examiners as a prior art information so that they could look into it and see that this information is already known and not grant patents on that information that is already available. So this is what we mean by a prior art database. Okay? So this is Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, TKDL, is a database of value added in TK information. So we have information in it, which is will have the old terminologies, but also it is linked to the modern terminologies as we understand today. Because the old terminologies are only understood by the domain people. That is, say, for instance, practitioners of Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha would understand, but we as a common person would not understand. Basically, the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library contains over 4.5 lakh formulations and techniques on Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, Yoga, and Soba Rigpa. Okay? The information that is input into the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library is through something called as Traditional Knowledge Resource Classification. This is based on something called IPC classification. You want to know more about these things, you can get in touch with us. But Traditional Knowledge Resource Classification is basically a system of codes. So through these codes, we enter it so that the whole entry and the data is language agnostic, and this is converted into English, French, German, Japanese, and Spanish. So the report that comes out will be available in these languages, which is easily understood by patent examiners over different patent offices in the world. Okay? Currently, the database is available only through non-disclosure agreements to 16 patent offices worldwide. It is not available to public. Although we have recently been granted permission to share this information with general public, we are working out with the modalities. As you understand, this is a very sensitive type of knowledge, very important knowledge. So we need to ensure that necessary security is there before we can share this information. Okay. So we also file something called third-party observations. This is a complementary, or more to say, of an application of the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library information. So we send through these third-party observations of pre-grant oppositions, we tell patent examiners that this information is already known and file it through a specific legal format to them for them to check it for themselves, whether that information is relevant to the particular patent application that they have they are examining. So the result of such activity has been that more than 323 patent applications have been revoked, amended, withdrawn, abandoned, by the presentation of TKDL evidences. Okay. So I move over to the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. This is the home page of the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. This is the sort of input, how we input data. Okay. So the information contained in the TKDL would be all about the book. This is basically in the form of a formulation. So it would have the ingredients, how the ingredients, in what form they're taken, how much of the ingredient is taken, and all this is connected to modern terminologies. So although the text will not contain the information on what the plant or a mineral ingredient is known as in English or the current terminology, we convert it with the help of domain experts and put it in a format that you and I or any common person would understand. Okay. So an important part of the TKDL is also the prior art information. That is the text information, the original text, which is in the form of shlokas, in the form of poetry, in Siddha, in the form of shlokas, or in Ayurveda, or in yoga, and also Unani. The lowermost thing is the Boti language I was talking to you about, which is in Suvarikpa. These things are converted into the format that I will show you now. So once we put it into the TKDL database in the form of through codes, what we will get is what you can see on this sheet now. So you will have a title, you have the details of the process of formulation, that is how it is prepared. Okay, the various ingredients that are used in it, the weight that is there in it, the composition, preparation is also detailed if that is available, and it is useful in the treatment of what? That is the most important aspect. That is why these particular traditional formulations were getting patented. See, all these have commercial value in the form of a medicinal, if it's a medicinal product. And that is why they were, getting patented in different places because of their commercial value. And that is why this prior art database needed to be created. Okay. Also, as I told you, the bibliographic details will also be given in detail. Right? To give you an idea of how the value addition in Traditional Knowledge Digital Library takes place, if we have a particular plant name, if you have a particular plant name, you would have the Unani description, Siddha description, Parikpa, common name, botanical name. What is the advantage of the TKDL is that although a practitioner of Ayurveda would know all about Ayurveda, he may not know much about Unani or Siddha. But our the database, the TKDL database, allows them to speak across the systems of medicine. Okay? Not only we give the botanical name, we also allow them to understand what is the plant called in different places. And by searching the database, you could guess information on which plant is commonly used for similar conditions or for different conditions across the different systems of medicine. Even disease names similarly are correlated, because you understand that in Ayurveda, Unani, it would be the symptoms that are indicated. It would not be directly the conditions, or like we call them in allopathy, fever, headache, appendicitis. What it is, associated with those symptoms and the conditions, those things would be written in this. And we have correlated all this so that we are able to correlate the disease information also from the old texts. So currently we contain, the TKDL contains about 4,53,000 formulations. And as I told you, we have already got the cabinet approval for widening TKDL database to users other than patent office. And we are still working on the modalities to allow the sharing. And besides the Ayur systems of medicines, where we have only currently taking up the traditional formulations, we are also looking into diagnostics, tools, devices, practices, surgical methods, also Indian agricultural practices and tools, and traditional metallurgy, which are being looked into for including as knowledge within the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. The watch and the monitor system is the third-party observations or pre-grant oppositions that I spoke about. So we have a team within the TKDL who monitors applications at select patent offices for the use of Indian traditional knowledge or genetic resources. So wherever they spot a particular application which makes use of traditional knowledge in India, they would submit something called as third-party observations, providing evidences from TKDL telling them that this information is already known. So the patent applicants, the examiners would send that information to patent applications, asking them for a response. Where the patent examiners find that this is appropriate information and the evidences deem the particular application not novel or not inventive, they would reject that application. So in a manner that by submitting these applications, the third-party observations, 323 applications, as I told you, have been amended, refused, withdrawn, or rejected by patent offices. Okay. The other thing that TKDL is already doing is that we are trying our, and making our efforts to include the TKDL database in the PCT minimum documentation list. This is a list that is used by all international search authorities and examination authorities for looking at prior art, which is they need to search for mandatorily before deciding the novelty or inventive step of particular application. Although this has not happened so far, the discussions at their PCT minimum task force is ongoing, and TKDL is a part of it. Just to give you a couple of examples of third-party observation, the outcomes. This is an example where there is a management, and for this is for the use in management and treatment of joint and muscle pain in vertebrates. Okay, so this is a composition of which contains bakuchiol for relieving pains derived from a inflammatory disorder. So this contains allium sativum, curcumin, gingiber officinal, that is ginger, and this by submitting TKDL observations, that is evidences from the TKDL database, this application was refused to grant. This was the Indian Patent Office. Similarly, we have given an example at the USPTO2. Okay. Then I just wanted to just rush you through some of the databases. See, we are talking about databases in India. I told you that we have databases in India, and Traditional Knowledge Digital Library is a very unique value-added database. But similarly, we do have databases outside India too, like the traditional Chinese medicine database at Taiwan. The only difference between the TKDL and these databases is probably that they have much more contemporary information from journals, information from other research applications too are available. They also contain information on the traditional Chinese medicine. Some of these databases are openly available. Some of them may be available at a cost, or in languages probably we may not be able to understand, but you all can go through the links that I have given to see what kind of databases are available. Similarly, we do have a Korean Traditional Knowledge Portal. Again, this contains information on articles, journal articles, and terminology, chemical compounds, diseases, disease mapping, so on and so forth. We also have the Philippine Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, very similar to ours, where they're talking about scientific name. Actually, many of the countries did come to India to look at the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, and to a very limited extent, they have created databases similar to the extent possible at their end, containing information on traditional medicine information. And the Philippines, Malaysia, all these countries are some of them. Okay. So we have this Malaysian database. You have traditional Chinese medicinal herb monographs. Okay. Another important documentation activity that is going on in India, it relates to oral traditional knowledge. Now, when I spoke about Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, I told you these are all from texts, manuscripts, information that is already documented. Only it is not available in a language and it's not accessible. The documentation of the People's Biodiversity Register is done by the National Biodiversity Authority, which comes under Ministry of Environment and Forest. What they do is use a very systematic way, that is a biodiversity management committee, which goes right up to the village level to speak to people, to speak to communities, and collect the information that is available on traditional knowledge. That's traditional knowledge and genetic resources. So it's a very expansive type of knowledge. I can give you, you can go to the PBR, you can go and see how the PBR is collected. There are several formats. It contains general description about the genetic resource. It will contain mapping. It will talk about the area. It will talk about the kind of tribes and people living there. If there is any associated knowledge, that is also recorded. Okay, it's quite a in-depth recording of the information. So far, about more than 2,67,000 such PBRs have been documented by the various biodiversity management committees, which all over India. Okay, So it's like you have the National Biodiversity Authority, you have the State Biodiversity Authority, then you have the biodiversity management committees who will go and record such information in due consultation with the particular communities. Okay. Then I just come to a slide putting together when we talk about defensive protection like database and registries, the PBR, that is People's Biodiversity Register. We have certain advantages. As I told you, they prevent erroneous grant of IPR. Why? Because they act as a prior art database. The patent examiner will go through them. They know it is already known information, so patents will not be granted. It will preserve valuable heritage because this information is, we have to preserve them for posterity. I told you the languages are dying out. The people are no longer interested in practicing that particular traditional knowledge. So how do we maintain? How do we preserve? We're putting them, documenting them. You can keep it, okay, for future generations. It also helps us to identify knowledge holders. Okay, by recording these things properly, you would be able to know who is the person who that particular traditional knowledge is identified with. But there are concerns. Okay, is by putting by all this information in one place, by putting it in languages that are understood by all, are we triggering more misappropriation? Prior informed consent, was it even taken from the person? Okay, a lot of recording of information is taking place, but is the person who is giving the information giving it willingly, or it has been taken by stealth without the person knowing it at all? Okay. Information control, like for instance, you create databases. Now the kind of informations we spoke about is like TKDL or the PBR. The custodians are the government of India, because this is a government of India initiative. But in other cases where the information is being collected by bits and pieces by people, who are the custodians, who are the owners? These are questions that need to be answered. They are concerns. The extent of access. I told you information. I saw someone says I'm not audible. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, okay. So the extent of access, when we talk about maintenance of the confidentiality of undisclosed TK, I told you some of this information may be documented, some not documented, some may be really secret information. Okay? So how far such information should be accessed? Safeguarding the information in the, the current technological advances, that's a very big challenge. Okay? For instance, genetic resources need not be even physically accessed. You could just take the digital sequencing data and do research and do whatever you want with it. And, it need not be even physically documented. So safeguarding of some information is also an important aspect. Now, all this we spoke about defensive protection because a lot of defensive protection examples do exist. But when we talk about positive protection, this is a rather, a very nascent area. It is there in particular countries. There is positive protection, but in India as such, we do not have positive protection. That is a particular statutory law to protect traditional knowledge, like we can protect copyrights, like we can protect, patents. There's nothing for traditional knowledge per se, no exclusive law. Okay. What are the challenges of applying the existing IP rights to protection of traditional knowledge? First and foremost, traditional knowledge is not novel. It is not even static. It's a dynamic knowledge. It's moving from one place to another. It is a living tradition. Innovations keep happening. And first and foremost, it is not novel. Then it is often community owned. So when you talk about intellectual property rights, they're all individual based. Okay? You can identify the owner per se. It could be a company, it could be a person. But in case of traditional knowledge, it's community owned. More than one community can own it. Different people can be practitioners, different people can be holders. So there are a lot of complications in understanding how this, traditional knowledge is being used and practiced. Okay? So can we apply patents, the law applicable to patents, to copyrights, to designs, plant variety protection, geographical indications? Plant variety protection to some extent, yes, because you can, protect extent variety. So if there is a particular tribe, having a know-how about, having how to, cultivate that particular plant variety. But what is important here to understand is all patent or copyrights or design, they all have finite life, finite protection time. Traditional knowledge, as I said, is dynamic living. Okay, so the kind of protection that we need for traditional knowledge has to be infinite, not finite, not 20 years, not 18 years, not 16 years. It is for posterity, for, in a continuous manner for the community and for the people to enjoy the benefits. Some examples of the Government of India frameworks that have some provisions indirectly to protect traditional knowledge and people's rights. So geographical indications is a sign, a mark, to protect the reputation of a product. So in this, there would be some kind of artifacts or weaving or all those things that are known. You have geographical indications for traditional Kanjivaram saris or traditional preparations, traditional creations of bamboo making or carving. These are traditional arts. Okay, they are protected, but this is only as a sign. The underlying traditional knowledge is not protected by this particular act. Similarly, industrial designs also could protect some creative forms. Copyright can protect. New plant varieties, as I said, could protect. Biological Diversity Act does contain some provisions in that no person can take this information from and access it without the permission of the National Biodiversity Authority. You need to take permission. So when you're using the genetic resource or associated traditional knowledge, you need to have permission. So the Biodiversity Authority knows that you're using it. And there are also provisions in the Act to provide access and benefit sharing to the people who are knowledge holders. More about this we will discuss tomorrow when we have tomorrow's lecture. So we also have the record, as I mentioned, of the PBR. The Forest Rights and Forest Dwelling Scheduled Tribes Act also has some provisions wherein the right to cultivate, self-cultivation, to see how that knowledge or traditional knowledge is that they have is accessed. There are some minor provisions in Forest Rights and Forest Dwelling of Scheduled Tribes and Scheduled Forest Dwellers Act too. Okay, but these are all indirect provisions. Also, at the international level, there are a lot of efforts because there are a large magnitude of mega biodiverse countries which have considerable traditional knowledge, like India, the African countries, and many other countries who want a regime, an international regime, to protect traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. Such a regime would actually mean that this it is a legally binding regime. It has to be followed by anybody who signs that particular international treaty. Okay? Such a statutory regime is being discussed under the aegis of the World Intellectual Property Organization. Here, why we are talking about an international regime? See, I spoke to you about national regimes which are there in Philippines, which is there in, say, Thailand or Malaysia. The thing is that all these are territorial, like Patent Act or like the Copyright Act, these are territorial. They will have limited impact when this is being used in some other country. So you won't be able to protect your traditional knowledge if it is being used in USA. You have a law. It is happening in USA. So what do? You can't do anything. You don't have any statutory redressal. There is no legal recourse. Okay? The increased commercial use beyond traditional context. That is, it is vulnerable to misappropriation and misuse. So all these things are being considered under the international efforts. These are the reasons for the international efforts to have a binding regime for protecting traditional knowledge. Okay? The aim of the international regime is to at least establish a minimum standards. Okay, it is up to the individual countries to have better standards, maximum standards, but at least a minimum standard is there so that all countries are bound by those particular provisions, right? So this committee that I'm talking about under the aegis of the WIPO is the Intergovernmental Committee on Intellectual Property, Genetic Resources, Traditional Knowledge and Folklore. India is also part of it. The Traditional Knowledge Digital Library also is part of the delegation, and negotiations have been going on since 2001. So you can understand the complex nature of these negotiations. Okay, we are close to convergence in the genetic resource instrument, but the TKTC instrument is under discussion, and there is a lot of divergence even today, including the definition of traditional knowledge. Okay? So although we are hopeful that this convergence does come about, and it is very important to a country like India that our traditional knowledge is protected, this would be an example of positive protection, okay? A protection through law by means of a regime. So in India, if we do have a traditional knowledge protection law, which will be a sui generis law, it means that is created within the legal framework. This will empower communities. it will protect traditional knowledge, it will control access and commercial exploitation without consent, it will enhance research and development, all with the permission of the knowledge holder. We have to understand that we are talking about people's rights here, the rights of the holders, the knowledge holders, the knowledge practitioners, and that is the most important thing, why we need to have a legal statutory provision which will protect traditional knowledge. Okay? So that's all I'll have to say here today. Thank you very much for your patient hearing, and we can have a few questions before Chandrayaan, I hope. So I'll stop presenting here. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you. I think we'll open up the floor for questions. Anuradha, I can take it up.
Very informative, and yeah, I think the participants are very grateful for so much of information on this. So I'm just waiting for some questions. We just have thank yous coming in now. Yeah, so far thank yous. Anybody has anything specific? You can either put up your hand and
maybe until we wait for the questions, Vijay, you can, perhaps elaborate a little more on the difference between, seeking IPR based on validation and actually innovating. So how do we overcome the inventive step and maybe some potential cases? What would constitute the inventive step and what would not?
Yeah. Okay. So in the context of traditional knowledge, if I say, I already told you that traditional knowledge per se is not patentable. So I'll take an example of, say, a traditional medicine formulation. Now, we have a lot of texts in which such information is already written. So you have a certain example of, say, a particular two plants, say, Withania somnifera and say some other plant, maybe Bacopa manieri, when mixed together have a particular effect. Now that effect is already mentioned in the text and it is already known. So if you go about trying to patent this information, you may not be able to get a patent on it because such an information is already known. But if you are able to create through experimental, verification by the addition of a third ingredient or create a stable product, we all know that when you talk about medicines or formulations, they have a certain type of shelf life. Okay, so if you're able to create more stable products, that would be a certain type of improvement. Also, if you have certain formulations which show surprising effect over what is already known or even a different effect, suppose these two combinations are known for a particular condition and a particular disease condition, and it solves certain problems. What you are doing is by adding a third ingredient or adding something else, you're able to show a surprising effect which is completely different from what is known. What is important when you talk about inventive step? It has to be improvement. It has to be something which is known over the existing prior art, that is over the existing information that is already present in the text that we are talking about. So such things will constitute inventive step. And when the patent examiner looks at the information that is provided by you in the form of experimentation, there is something called, when the patent examiner looks at the patent application, the experimental data has also to be provided. Okay, that's a complete disclosure of what is the invention. So in that particular thing, if you're able to show how your invention is better than what is already known in the texts and manuscripts, that would be a very informative thing which will help the examiner to decide whether your particular invention is inventive or not. Okay? That's one way of explaining it. Maybe Dr. Satagiri, you also want to give some other example on this?
I think this is fine. Maybe tomorrow when you're covering the ethical aspects, you can give a few more examples.
Sure,
I think
sure.
people are all waiting to see the Chandrayaan 3.
Yes, today is Chandrayaan's day.
Yes, yes. Anuradha, we can't hear you.
I said maybe we can stop for the day because there are no
Sure.
specific questions coming in. and
Yes.
let everybody comfortably get ready for the mega event. And then, and like I said, I apologize once more for the email mishap. I mean, for the technical glitches that we had. We'll try to make sure that tomorrow we are on time and with all the links working correctly. So, Piyush, do you have anything? Piyush, do you have anything to say?
Ma'am.
Please.
So AICT has sent a mail. Could you please check with the participants if they received any mail from AICT? Otherwise, we have to request them resend
You
the
can
mail.
directly talk to them, Piyush. You can directly address them and find out.
Yes, yes. So we request the participants to write as yes in the chat box if you received an email from AICTE.
Someone did say that they have received, I don't know. Dr. Alok Sharma perhaps mentioned.
Yes. Thank you. Or no, it's okay. Done. Yes, yes, yes.
There's just one other thing I wanted to mention. There are many mails that we are sending where the email addresses are not bouncing back. It's saying mail undelivered. So that is an issue, and therefore we don't know how to resolve that because that would have been put into your registration form itself. So what we are suggesting is we have sent you the Google link. So for tomorrow, what we will try is the Google Drive link. We've made a Google Drive link. So Piyush, can you please share that Google Drive link? So
So
on
today,
the Google Drive,
which mail is received, na, Arya? For next 3 sessions, tomorrow and day after tomorrow, every link is there with our Google Drive, where all PPT will be uploaded soon, one
not
by
just the
one.
PPT. I also requested a Word document to be put on that. So that Word document will have the link. So if you can keep the Google Drive link with you, if you save that, on that, the WebEx links will be there, as well as the YouTube links will be there. Okay. So in case you don't get a mail, please refer to that Google Drive link, the doc that is there, to be able to connect. And feel free to reach out to us either on our number or our mail, and we'll try and act immediately to give you whatever is required to enable you to join. All right. I think I won't take too much of time, but I hope you understand the small challenges that are there in this whole thing. But we are trying our best. Okay. So we'll end here. We'll end with a small mantra and then Shanti mantra, and then we'll close. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And the last prayer is Om Chandrayana Suavatirnamastu.
Yes.
Chandrama, on the Chandrama. So, Dhanyavada.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Thank you.
See you all
Thanks
tomorrow. Thank you
again.
very
See
much.
you
See you tomorrow.
again tomorrow.
Thank
And
you.
best wishes to the Chandrayaan and to all the Indians here.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.